welcome in, buddy. How you doing?
Thanks, Rob. I'm good. Good. I'm good as anyone in March.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Well said. You got to tell me, where are you right now? Because you've got the best set in America.
Yeah, I just had this built especially for the. As soon as I figured out this is the Zoom podcast, we were working around the clock. Now this is the attic of the house. It's where my desk is. It's where I've been working for a long time. It's been safe harbor for decades.
We really want to talk about your first book, The Good Nurse, because it's getting a pretty exciting chapter added onto it. But before we go in there, let's just start by tell me about Charlie Cullen.
Right. Do you want to hear about who he is and what he is, or how
I want like the cliff note. Just give me his bio if you were going to put it into 3 sentences.
Yeah, the real short version is he's the most prolific serial killer in American history. He was a nurse working in New Jersey and Pennsylvania from up until the early 2000s, 2002, 2003. And he was killing patients the entire time he was working, which is 16 years at over a dozen hospitals. And during that time, he kept on getting moved on hospital to hospital because he would be found out and sort of passed out the back door. And so the story of Charles Cullen is not just that he probably killed, the best estimates are 300 to 400 people while he was working as a nurse, and not as a mercy killer, as was initially assumed, because he didn't always know who he was killing. It wasn't really about them. It was about him. But the bigger story, certainly to me, was the fact that there were sane, capable, highly paid administrators that were at the very least not doing their job, and at the very worst complicit.
How did this story find you in the beginning?
Yeah, it was a sort of in between magazine stories. It working so as you know, a lot of what I do and have done traditionally are these really long form nonfiction stories for magazines, right? And I just come off of one that had really burned it was a lot of work, and it melted my mind, and I really felt like, okay, I could use a break. But but the stories also pull you back out into the world, right? And so you can't really shut that instinct down to be looking at stuff and be interested, which is the reason you do this in the first place. And there was a little item I saw in the paper, and the headline grabbed me. It was serial killer nurse attempts to donate kidney from jail, something circusy like that, something crazy. And I was like, wow, that's the most insane thing I've ever seen. So I put it in my wallet and sort of forgot about it, or thought about it. But the problem is that he wasn't talking to anybody. This is right. Charles Cullen. He'd been caught. He had confessed to some of his murders. He described them as mercy killings, and that was it. He was ready to go away. He wasn't going to issue a statement to the families of the victims. He wasn't going to say anything in public, and he certainly wasn't going to talk to anyone from the media. Wasn't going to talk to a journalist, and he'd been asked by absolutely everybody. And so the odds of him talking to me seemed pretty slim. But I did know that he was attempting to donate a kidney, and he was attempting to donate a kidney to someone who actually needed that kidney, someone who would most probably die without it. And I thought, this is a crazy story, because serial killer or not, ironically, the families of the victims that were blocking him from being able to donate that kidney, they were doing it because it was their idea of what punishment would look like. They didn't want him to be able to express his will, to be able to do whatever it is he wanted to do, which in this case was to save the life of an innocent person. So the victims of the families who had their innocent people murdered, ironically, were blocking another innocent person from surviving. And I thought, well, this is a sufficiently screwed up situation to be, it's about, again, something more than what it seems. And so I wrote him a letter, which I worked on for a really long time, which turned out to be exactly maybe the only thing he would respond to, and where I gave him the agency and the power, and said, look, I'm sure everyone's asking you to talk to you for all sorts of reasons, but I also think you should be able to donate a kidney. I'm not your what I told him literally in the letter was, I'm not your karmic accountant. I'm not here to weigh the balances of good and bad, and I'm not about what you've done. But I do think that donating a kidney is a good thing, and you should be able to do it. And I would think that if you let me write a story, whatever you might think about stories about you and so forth, it'd be more likely to get it done. And if that's something that's important to you, talk to me. And if not, I get that too. And that turns out to be exactly the right way to address a sociopath who wants to donate an organ.
When you climb into the mind of a serial killer and you're living in that mind for extended periods of time, I mean, what toll did that take on you? And then also, were you asking yourself this question of, what is it about me that made this guy feel comfortable talking to me about all this?
Yeah. Which one to start with? Yeah, I mean, you can get a little self-conscious with that one. You think, is it good that I'm the only guy he'll talk to? Sort of, is this a resume builder? Is this to start with? What is it about me? And I liked, I like to think that, first of all, it was simply the fact that I was interested in kidney donation. My father is a kidney doctor, and I grew up with the problems with kidneys. Grew up in dialysis units and seeing that, and going door to door to raise money for the Kidney Foundation, American Kidney Foundation, things like that. So I already had that, and that was part of it. I think also the fact that I was genuine. I wanted to listen. I didn't want to write a salacious book. I wanted to hear what he had to say, and not his justification, because he didn't have one as such. But I think the bigger picture, he certainly blamed the hospitals, and said very clearly that he felt that they knew, and detailed that. And I wanted to get all the facts, and he was the keeper of at least a portion of those facts. So I tried not to take that too personally. But in terms of the mental toll, trying to write from the mind of a sociopath, not as I did this and I did that, but to really internalize what he thought and how he thought. With a sociopath, they have a different, normally when we meet people, there's sort of a drop-down menu. When you see somebody, it's sort of, avoid eye contact, say hi, greet them. There's certain things that you think you can do with people, and they're, all on the same level. They're all on that same drop-down menu. And with a sociopathic murder, one of the options that's equally weighted on that same menu is murder. And it doesn't really have a greater weight. That's the thing that's really hard to get through your head as I was writing it too, is it's not sort of, and then I decided to do this and it was great. It's really it just is what happens. It's one of the other things he can do, and he does it because he can. And so having that in my head, successfully putting that in my head, made me a little weird.
Did you come away with, and I'm sure for every serial killer, there's a set of circumstances that lead them on their path, but did it seem as though, had Charlie's life started off differently, had he had a different experience in the Navy where he was kind of brutalized, would he have still gone in that direction? Is it something about just who he is genetically, or was it the result of serious trauma?
Yeah, it's so hard to know that, and really that trauma dates more to his childhood. And it being a nonfiction book, and I take that very seriously. I didn't say anything I didn't know.
Right.
And so because I wasn't there in his childhood and he wasn't completely forthcoming, I only illuminate those things that were illuminated for me. But even in shining a flashlight around that haunted house that he grew up in, his dad had already died by the time he was born. His mother was older. All of his siblings, and he had a lot of them, were full grown. He was a late life. He considered himself sort of a mistake. And I know people say that, but I think he took that to heart. Really connected only with his mother. His brothers brutalized him. I think sexually, and there were a lot of them were IV drug users that were using and dealing out of the house. And I think he had a lot of traumatic experience there. And then his mother's death affected him profoundly. His mother was, she was in a car accident with his sister at the wheel, and his sister was epileptic and hadn't taken her medicine, and he wasn't told what had happened. And by the time he got to the hospital, they'd already taken her body away, and he really blamed the hospital for stealing his mother. And consciously or not, when he ends up going into nursing, sort of having it find him, he goes to study nursing at the very same hospital where his mother's body disappeared. So whether this is him acting out some giant psychological play, or some sort of traumatic head injury changed his thinking, it's really hard to say. I think it's a combination of the way he was born. I think sociopaths are born, but aspects of his upbringing channeled into that. And one of the things I really wanted to make clear is that he still had choices, how he felt about things, whether or not he really felt any great emotion when somebody is dying horribly in a seizure he's created by overdosing them with insulin, and he's in the room, and the fact that he doesn't really feel anything negative about that. That may just be the way he is as a sociopath. He may just not have that wiring, but the choice to do that in the first place, that was still his. He was found sane, fit to stand trial. So those personal choices are still his own, and he has to own them.